Persians! Come and get them! The defiant cry echoes through the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where King Leonidas, his crimson cape billowing in the wind, commands his 300 Spartan warriors. The year is 480 BC, and before them stands the largest army the ancient world has ever witnessed. Over 100,000 Persian soldiers led by the mighty King Xerxes I. As dawn breaks over the hot gates, as Thermopylae was known to the Greeks, the air is thick with tension. The narrow coastal passage, barely wide enough for a single cart to pass, would become the stage for history's most legendary last stand. The Spartan warriors stand resolute, their bronze armor gleaming in the morning sun, their red cloaks a stark contrast against the gray limestone cliffs that tower above them. This final position was chosen with careful tactical consideration. The Spartans had transformed this natural bottleneck into a killing field. Behind them stood the Phocian Wall, an ancient fortification they had rebuilt to funnel the Persian forces into their waiting spears. The geography itself became their ally. To their left, the steep cliffs of Mount Kallidromos rose impossibly high. To their right, treacherous coastal marshes and the rocky shores of the Malian Gulf prevented any flanking maneuver. The Spartans' preparation for this moment was methodical and deeply rooted in their warrior culture. They had spent the previous evening in rituals that would seem strange to modern eyes. Warriors braided each other's hair, as was their custom before battle. They anointed their bodies with oil and performed their war dances. The Pirish, their bronze armor clanking rhythmically as they moved. These were not men preparing for death, but warriors preparing for immortality. Leonidas himself embodied the perfect Spartan king. Unlike the Persian Xerxes who viewed himself as a living god, Leonidas was first and foremost a soldier. He had endured the brutal Agoge training system like any other Spartan male, sleeping on hard ground, surviving on minimal rations, learning to fight, kill, and if necessary, die for Sparta. His selection of the 300 was itself a masterpiece of psychological warfare. He chose only men who had living sons, ensuring Sparta's warrior lineage would continue regardless of the battle's outcome. The Persian army approaching them was a sight that would have broken lesser men. The ground trembled under the march of tens of thousands of boots. The massive force included warriors from every corner of Xerxes' vast empire, from the immortals of Persia, wearing their distinctive scaled armor and wickerwork shields, to Median spearmen, Egyptian marines, and Ethiopian archers. Their weapons and armor glinted in the sunlight like a moving sea of metal, their numbers so vast that, as Herodotus famously wrote, their arrows would block out the sun. To this, Dionysus, a Spartan warrior, made his famous reply that would echo through the ages. "Good. Then we shall fight in the shade." This quintessentially Spartan response, laconic, defiant, and darkly humorous, perfectly captured the spirit of these warriors who stood at the hot gates. The tactical situation was clear to everyone. The Spartans knew they would die. This was not a battle for victory in the conventional sense. It was a battle for time. Every hour they could delay Xerxes' advance would give the Greek city-states more time to mobilize, more time for Athens to evacuate, more time for the Greek navy to prepare. The 300 Spartans, along with their allies, were not fighting for their own lives. They were fighting for the very survival of Greek civilization. As they took their final positions, the Spartans did not show fear. They did not make long speeches or dramatic declarations. Instead, they displayed the quiet professionalism that made them the most feared warriors in the ancient world. They checked their equipment one last time. The heavy bronze shields that would form their impenetrable wall, the long spears that would keep the Persian forces at bay, the short swords that would taste enemy blood in close combat. Leonidas, standing at the front of his men, exemplified the Spartan ideal of leading from the front. His final recorded words to his men were characteristically understated. "Eat well, for tonight we dine in Hades." This was not bravado, but a simple statement of fact. These men had accepted their fate with the same discipline and dedication with which they had lived their lives. The last stand at Thermopylae would become more than just a military engagement. It would become a symbol of courage against overwhelming odds, of sacrifice for a greater cause, of the power of training, discipline, and unwavering determination. Even in defeat, the Spartans would achieve something far greater than victory. They would achieve immortality in the annals of history, inspiring countless generations to come with their ultimate display of devotion to duty and unwavering courage in the face of certain death. To this day, their story continues to resonate, reminding us that true courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about standing firm despite it. The hot gates would forever be remembered as the place where 300 warriors showed the world that sometimes the measure of a life isn't in its length, but in how it's given in service to something greater than oneself. Welcome to another journey through time on the Legacy of Empires channel. Today, we delve into one of the most extraordinary battles in ancient history, a confrontation that transcended time to become synonymous with courage and sacrifice. Picture yourself standing on the Acropolis in the 5th century BC, gazing out over a Greece that was far different from the unified country we know today. This was a land where myth and reality intertwined, where gods were believed to walk among mortals, and where heroes carved their names into the bedrock of history. This was the cradle of Western civilization, a land where philosophy, democracy, and warfare would reach unprecedented heights. Greece in the 5th century BC was a vibrant tapestry of independent city-states, each with its own unique character, laws, and destinies. From the snow-capped peaks of Mount Olympus to the sun-drenched shores of Crete, each polis forged its own path through history. This was not one nation but many, bound together by language, religion, and a shared sense of being Greek or Hellenic, in a world they viewed as largely barbaric. Athens, the jewel of the ancient world, was experiencing its golden age. Under the leadership of Pericles, the city had become the intellectual and cultural heart of the Mediterranean. The Parthenon was rising on the Acropolis, its marble columns reaching toward the heavens. In the agora below, philosophers like Anaxagoras taught their students, while playwrights like Aeschylus presented their masterpieces in the theater of Dionysus. This was a city where art, literature, and democratic ideals flourished under the watchful eye of their patron goddess, Athena. Meanwhile, in the southern Peloponnese, Sparta was crafting something entirely different, the most formidable military force the ancient world had ever seen. Unlike the philosophical debates of Athens, Sparta resonated with the rhythmic march of warriors in training. From the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their homes to begin the agoge, a brutal training system that would transform them into the elite warriors known as the Spartiates. Their society was a carefully engineered military machine, where luxury was scorned and martial valor was the highest virtue. The contrast between these two great cities could not have been starker. While Athenian citizens debated politics in the assembly, Spartan warriors trained in the harsh discipline that would make them legendary. While Athens built temples and theaters, Sparta built barracks and training grounds. Yet both would soon be called upon to defend their way of life against an unprecedented threat from the east. In the vast Persian Empire, a storm was brewing. Under the command of Xerxes I, son of Darius I, the largest empire the world had ever seen was preparing for war. The humiliation of their defeat at Marathon 10 years earlier still burned in Persian memory. Darius had sworn revenge against the Greeks, and now his son Xerxes was determined to fulfill that oath. The Persian Empire stretched from the Indus River to Egypt, from the steppes of Central Asia to the shores of the Aegean. Its army was drawn from dozens of nations, each contributing their unique fighting styles and weapons to create a force of overwhelming size and diversity. Xerxes spent years preparing for this invasion. He ordered the construction of a bridge of ships across the Hellespont, a massive engineering feat that would allow his army to cross from Asia into Europe. Supply depots were established along the planned route of march. Ships were built, weapons were forged, and troops were gathered from every corner of the empire. This was to be more than just a military campaign. It was to be the ultimate demonstration of Persian power and the divine authority of the great king. The gathering storm did not go unnoticed in Greece. Despite their differences, many Greek city-states recognized the existential threat that Persia represented. This was not merely a war for territory or resources. It was a clash of civilizations. On one side stood the Persian Empire, with its absolute monarchy and vast, multicultural army. On the other stood the Greek city-states, fiercely independent, yet united in their determination to remain free. This was the world that would soon witness one of the most extraordinary battles in military history. The stage was set for a confrontation that would pit Greek discipline and courage against Persian numbers and resources. At Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, these forces would meet in a battle that would become legend. But more than that, it would become a symbol of the eternal human struggle for freedom against tyranny, of the few standing against the many, of the power of training and discipline against overwhelming odds. The echoes of these events still resonate today, reminding us that the ancient Greeks were not merely characters in old stories, but real people who faced real choices with consequences that would shape the course of Western civilization. Their world may seem distant to us now, but their courage, their sacrifices, and their determination to remain free continue to inspire us across the millennia. Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, stands as one of history's most perfectly conceived battlefields, where nature and strategy merge to create an arena worthy of legend. The name itself, derived from the Greek words thermos, hot, and pyle, gates, refers to the sulfuric hot springs that bubble up from the earth, filling the air with their mineral-rich steam. But it was not these thermal waters that would make this place immortal. It was the blood of warriors that would forever consecrate this narrow strip of land between mountain and sea. The ancient geography of Thermopylae was a masterpiece of natural fortification. To truly understand the battlefield, we must strip away 2,500 years of geological changes and envision the landscape as it existed in 480 BC. Modern archaeological studies have revealed that the ancient coastline pressed much closer to the mountains than it does today, creating an even more formidable bottleneck than previously imagined. The passage was so narrow that, at its most constricted point, only a single cart could pass through, a fact that would transform a Persian advantage in numbers into a deadly liability. On the northern side of the pass, Mount Kallidromos rose like a natural wall, its limestone cliffs soaring nearly 1,000 feet into the sky. These weren't gentle slopes that could be easily scaled. They were sheer rock faces, weathered by centuries of wind and rain into treacherous surfaces that offered little purchase for would-be climbers. The mountain's face was broken only by a few shepherd's paths, one of which would later prove fateful to the battle's outcome. To the south, the waters of the Malian Gulf crashed against a rocky shoreline. In 480 BC, this wasn't the broad coastal plain we see today, created by millennia of sediment deposits. Instead, the sea came right up to the path, creating a narrow causeway that was often slick with spray from the waves. The combination of the mountain wall and the sea created a natural corridor that would become one of history's most famous killing grounds. The terrain offered three distinct bottlenecks or gates, each of which could be defended by a relatively small force against vastly superior numbers. The middle gate, where the main battle would be fought, was the narrowest. Here, the Phocians had previously built a defensive wall to guard against northern invasions. The Spartans would repair this structure, using it as a force multiplier in their defensive strategy. The geological characteristics of the pass played directly into Greek military strengths. The famous Greek phalanx formation, with its overlapping shields and bristling spears, was most effective when it could maintain its cohesion. The narrow confines of Thermopylae meant that the Greeks could present an unbreakable wall of bronze shields to their enemies, while the Persians would be unable to bring their superior numbers to bear effectively. The weather and climate of the region added another layer of complexity to the battlefield. In late summer, when the battle took place, the temperature in the pass could become stifling, particularly with the hot springs adding their steam to the already humid air. The limestone cliffs reflected and amplified the heat, creating conditions that would test the endurance of both armies. Recent archaeological excavations have revealed even more details about the ancient battlefield. Core samples taken from the area show that the original ground level was several meters below today's surface. This means that the pass was not only narrower but also flanked by even steeper cliffs than modern visitors observe. The discovery of Persian arrowheads, broken pottery, and other military artifacts has helped archaeologists precisely map the battle lines and verify ancient accounts of the fighting. The terrain also influenced the timing of the battle. The Persians arrived in late August or early September, when the waters of the Malian Gulf were still suitable for their supply ships. This same period marked the celebration of the Carnia in Sparta, a religious festival that traditionally prohibited military activity, a restriction that would affect how many troops Sparta could initially commit to the defense. Perhaps most crucially, the geography of Thermopylae offered something rare in ancient warfare, a chance for a small force to neutralize the advantages of a larger army. In open battle, the Persian numbers would have been overwhelming, but in the confines of the hot gates, superior numbers became almost meaningless. The pass forced the Persians to advance in a narrow column, negating their ability to outflank their opponents or bring their full strength to bear. This was the ground chosen for one of history's most famous last stands, a place where geography and courage would combine to create legend. The hot gates would prove to be more than just a battlefield. They would become a symbol of how terrain, strategy, and valor could combine to achieve the seemingly impossible. Even today, standing in the pass of Thermopylae, one can almost hear the clash of bronze against bronze, the shouts of warriors, and the timeless call of courage echoing off those ancient cliffs. On the precipice of one of history's most legendary battles stood two men who could not have been more different. One was the embodiment of warrior discipline and democratic leadership, the other the personification of divine monarchy and unlimited power. Their clash at Thermopylae would represent not just a battle between armies, but a collision between two fundamentally different views of civilization and human society. Leonidas, king of Sparta, was not born to be king. As the third son, he was not exempted from the brutal agoge training system that forged Spartan warriors. This twist of fate would prove crucial, for it meant that unlike many Spartan kings, Leonidas had experienced firsthand the full rigors of Spartan military education. From the age of 7, he had endured the same harsh training as any other Spartan boy. Sleeping on reed mats, foraging for food, enduring brutal physical contests, and learning the intricate dance of phalanx warfare. The agode shaped not just Leonidas's body, but his entire worldview. He learned to read and write, but also to survive, to lead, and to understand the complex code of honor that governed Spartan society. He was taught that a Spartan should return from battle either with his shield or on it. Victory or death were the only acceptable outcomes. This was not mere rhetoric for Leonidas. It was the foundation of his character. When fate and circumstance made him king, Leonidas brought this warrior's perspective to leadership. He understood that being a Spartan king meant being first among equals, not a divine ruler. He ate the same black broth as his men, trained alongside them, and knew their strengths and weaknesses intimately. His decision to lead the 300 chosen warriors personally was characteristic of this leadership style. He would ask nothing of his men that he wasn't willing to do himself. The selection of the 300 warriors itself revealed Leonidas's deep understanding of both military strategy and human psychology. He chose only men who had living sons, ensuring Sparta's warrior lineage would continue regardless of the battle's outcome. This decision was both practical and deeply symbolic, demonstrating his commitment to Sparta's survival beyond his own life or the lives of his chosen warriors. Across the battlefield stood a completely different type of ruler. Xerxes, the King of Kings, was the embodiment of Oriental absolute monarchy. Unlike Leonidas, who had earned his warriors' credentials through years of harsh training, Xerxes had inherited the largest empire the world had ever seen. As the son of Darius I, he was raised to believe in his own divine nature. The Persian king was not merely a ruler. He was considered a living god, an intermediary between heaven and earth. Xerxes commanded an army that reflected the vast expanse and diversity of his empire. His forces included the elite immortals of Persia, with their distinctive scaled armor and wicker shields, Median spearmen in their colorful tunics, Egyptian marines skilled in boarding actions, Ethiopian archers with their enormous bows, and cavalry from the steppes of Central Asia. Each contingent brought its own fighting style, weapons, and traditions, making the Persian army a microcosm of the known world. The Persian king's approach to leadership stood in stark contrast to the Spartan model. While Leonidas led from the front, Xerxes commanded from a golden throne set upon a hill overlooking the battlefield. While Spartan warriors earned their positions through merit and training, Persian soldiers fought under the weight of the lash. Xerxes believed his divine authority and overwhelming numbers would guarantee victory, a belief that would be severely tested at Thermopylae. Yet Xerxes was not simply a decadent Oriental monarch, as Greek propaganda often portrayed him. He was an intelligent ruler who had spent years preparing for this invasion. He understood logistics, strategy, and the importance of overwhelming force. His army was not just large, it was well organized, with sophisticated supply lines and engineering capabilities that could bridge the Hellespont and Canal through peninsulas. The psychological contrast between these leaders was reflected in their motivations for the coming battle. Leonidas fought to defend not just Sparta, but the principle of Greek independence and the right of cities to govern themselves. His stand at Thermopylae was a calculated sacrifice to buy time for the Greek cities to unite and prepare their defenses. Xerxes, on the other hand, fought to complete his father's unfinished conquest, to punish the Greeks for their defiance, and to extend his divine authority over the known world. These two men, the warrior king and the god king, represented not just different military styles but different conceptions of human society and governance. Their confrontation at Thermopylae would become more than a mere battle. It would become a symbolic clash between East and West, between democracy and absolutism, between the power of disciplined few and the might of the numerous many. Even today, these contrasting leadership styles offer lessons in the nature of power and authority. Leonidas, who died alongside his men, and Xerxes, who watched from afar as his troops were slaughtered, present timeless archetypes of leadership that continue to resonate in modern discussions of power, responsibility, and sacrifice. For 3 blood-soaked days in the late summer of 480 BC, the narrow pass of Thermopylae witnessed a confrontation that would alter the course of Western civilization. This was not merely a battle, it was a masterclass in tactical warfare and human determination that would echo through the centuries. The first light of battle found the Greeks perfectly positioned. The Spartan force of 300 elite warriors, supported by approximately 7,000 allies from other Greek city-states, had transformed their position into a killing machine of terrifying efficiency. The Greek phalanx formation, perfected through centuries of warfare, was ideally suited to the narrow confines of the hot gates. Their overlapping bronze shields, known as aspes, created an impenetrable wall of metal, while their long spears, the fearsome dory, extended outward in multiple rows. This was the ultimate expression of Greek military science, a human fortress of bronze and iron. The first Persian assault came at dawn. Waves of infantry crashed against the Greek line like water against a cliff. The narrow frontage meant that the Persians could only bring a small portion of their vast army to bear at any one time. Their arrows, which Xerxes had boasted would darken the sun, proved largely ineffective against the Greek shields. Instead, Persian soldiers found themselves forced to advance into a forest of Greek spears, where their lighter armor and shorter weapons put them at a severe disadvantage. The fighting was unlike anything the Persians had experienced. In open battle, their superior numbers would have allowed them to envelope and crush their opponents. But in the confines of Thermopylae, the Greek phalanx was nearly invincible. The Spartans, in particular, demonstrated why they were considered the finest soldiers in the ancient world. Their movements were precise, their discipline absolute. When Persian soldiers managed to get past the spear points, the Greeks would draw their short swords, the xiphos, and demonstrate their expertise in close-quarter combat. By midday, the pass had become a charnel house. Persian bodies began to pile up, creating an additional obstacle for subsequent attacks. Xerxes, watching from his golden throne on a nearby hillside, was forced to witness something he had never seen before: his troops being systematically slaughtered by a vastly smaller force. In desperation, Xerxes committed his elite troops, the Immortals, to the battle. These warriors, so named because their unit was always kept at exactly 10,000 men, with any casualties being immediately replaced, were the finest soldiers in the Persian Empire. They attacked with skill and determination that exceeded that of the regular Persian troops, but the result was the same. The Greek position held firm, and more Persian bodies joined the growing pile in the pass. The first day ended with the Persians having nothing to show for their efforts except massive casualties. The second day followed a similar pattern. The Greeks had developed a rotation system, with fresh troops constantly moving to the front while tired warriors stepped back to rest. This allowed them to maintain their defensive line at maximum effectiveness throughout the long hours of combat. However, the course of the battle would be changed not by force of arms, but by treachery. A local Greek named Ephialtes approached the Persian camp with information about a mountain path that could be used to outflank the Greek position. This path, known to local shepherds, wound through the mountains behind the Greek position. Xerxes immediately dispatched a force under General Hydarnes to exploit this intelligence. When word reached Leonidas of the Persian flanking movement, he faced a crucial decision. The military situation was now hopeless. Once the Persians completed their flanking maneuver, the Greek position would be untenable. In this moment, Leonidas made a decision that would echo through history. He dismissed the majority of the Greek allies, keeping only his 300 Spartans, along with 700 Thespians who refused to leave and 400 Thebans who were kept as hostages. This decision transformed what would have been a military defeat into an immortal legend. Leonidas understood that while the battle was lost, something greater could be won. By sacrificing himself and his men, he could buy time for the Greek cities to prepare their defenses, and more importantly, provide an example of courage and dedication that would inspire Greece to ultimate victory. The battle had evolved beyond a mere military engagement. It had become a demonstration of what free men, fighting for their homes and beliefs, could achieve against overwhelming odds. The Persian army, for all its size and grandeur, was an army of subjects serving a distant monarch. The Greeks at Thermopylae were citizens defending their way of life, their laws, and their freedom. This transformation of defeat into moral victory would prove crucial in the larger context of the Persian invasion. The stand at Thermopylae showed other Greek cities that the Persians could be resisted, that their numbers were not invincible. It provided time for Athens to be evacuated and for the Greek navy to be positioned at Salamis, where they would eventually deliver a crushing defeat to the Persian fleet. The Battle of Thermopylae represents more than just a military engagement. It became a symbol of the power of training, discipline, and devotion to duty in the face of overwhelming odds. It demonstrated that victory is not always measured in tactical success, but sometimes in the moral example provided to others. In dying to the last man, the Spartans and their allies created something that would prove far more powerful than military victory. They created a legend that would inspire countless generations to come. Dawn broke on the third day at Thermopylae with an otherworldly calm. The remaining Spartans, now aware of their impending doom, began their morning rituals with an almost supernatural composure. This would be their last sunrise, and they intended to meet their fate in a manner befitting warriors of Sparta. In what would become one of history's most poignant displays of warrior spirit, the Spartans meticulously prepared themselves for death as if preparing for a sacred ceremony. They combed and dressed their long hair, a Spartan tradition before battle that had deeper significance on this final morning. This was not mere vanity. It was an act of defiance, a statement that even in the face of certain death, they would maintain their discipline and traditions to the very end. Leonidas gathered his remaining force, the 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians who had refused to abandon their allies, and 400 Thebans who remained under compulsion. The king's words to his men that morning have echoed through the centuries. "Eat well, for tonight we shall dine in Hades." This characteristically Spartan display of gallows humor revealed much about their cultural attitude toward death. For them, death in battle was not something to fear, but an opportunity to achieve immortal glory. The morning preparation took on an almost ritualistic quality. Warriors helped each other don their bronze armor, checking straps and fittings with practiced precision. They would ensure that every piece of equipment was perfectly placed, not because they expected to survive, but because this attention to detail was fundamental to who they were as Spartans. Their shields, the hoplon, were polished one final time, the bronze surfaces gleaming in the early morning light. The tactical situation had changed dramatically from the previous days. No longer would they fight from their defensive position behind the Phocian wall. With Persian forces now moving to surround them from the mountain path, the Greeks knew they had to take the initiative. Leonidas made a bold decision. They would advance into the wider part of the pass, taking the fight to the Persians while they still had the strength to do so. This final advance of the Spartans was unlike anything the Persians had witnessed in their numerous campaigns. Instead of waiting for the enemy behind their shields, the Greeks pushed forward into the widening pass. This was no longer about tactical advantage or buying time. It was about inflicting as much damage as possible on the Persian army before their inevitable fall. The Spartans fought with what ancient sources describe as divine fury. They knew that each Persian soldier they killed would be one less to march against their homes and families. They used every weapon at their disposal. When their spears broke, they fought with their swords. When their swords shattered, they fought with their bare hands and teeth. The Persian forces, despite their overwhelming numbers, were taken aback by the sheer ferocity of men who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Leonidas himself fought in the thick of the battle, leading his men from the front as he had done throughout the engagement. According to ancient accounts, he fell in the fiercest part of the fighting. The battle for his body became a savage struggle in itself, as the Spartans fought to protect their fallen king's corpse from Persian desecration. For times they drove back the Persian forces, recovering their leader's body at great cost. The end came not as a collapse but as a final, defiant stand. The surviving Greeks pulled back to a small hill within the pass. Here, with their backs to the wall and enemies on all sides, they fought until their weapons broke, and then fought with their hands. The Persians, not daring to come to close quarters with these fierce warriors, finally ended the battle with volleys of arrows from a distance. When the dust settled and the Persian forces finally moved forward, they found a scene that would haunt them for generations. The remaining Greeks had died to the last man, their bodies lying where they fell, facing toward the enemy. They had kept their oath. Not one Spartan had surrendered or fled. Even Xerxes, the god king himself, was moved to acknowledge their courage, allegedly saying, "If I had men like these in my army, I would soon conquer the world." The final day at Thermopylae transcended the normal boundaries of warfare. It became something more, a testament to human courage and dedication to principle that would echo through the ages. The Spartans and their allies had transformed what could have been merely a military defeat into an immortal symbol of resistance against overwhelming odds. In the end, the significance of their sacrifice would far outlive the battle itself. The example set by these warriors would inspire not only the Greek resistance to Persian invasion but countless others throughout history who faced similarly impossible odds. Their death was not a defeat but a victory of spirit over circumstance, of principle over pragmatism, of duty over survival. This last stand would be remembered not for its tactical significance, but for what it revealed about human nature, that there are some principles worth dying for, and that true courage lies not in the absence of fear, but in the determination to face it and move forward regardless. The morning preparations of those warriors, calmly combing their hair in the face of certain death, would become a timeless symbol of dignity and dedication in the face of overwhelming fate. The Battle of Thermopylae stands as one of history's most profound examples of courage, sacrifice, and strategic brilliance. In 480 BC, a small force of Greek warriors, led by King Leonidas of Sparta and his legendary 300 men, made their heroic last stand against the mighty Persian army of Xerxes I. Though the battle ended in defeat for the Greeks, Its impact would forever alter the course of Western civilization. The geographical setting played a crucial role in this historic confrontation. Thermopylae, meaning hot gates in Greek, was a narrow coastal passage between the steep mountains of central Greece and the Malian Gulf. This natural bottleneck prevented the massive Persian army from utilizing their superior numbers effectively, allowing the smaller Greek force to hold their position for 3 crucial days. The Persian army, numbering between 100,000 and 300,000 soldiers according to various historical accounts, faced off against approximately 7,000 Greeks, including the famous 300 Spartans. The Persian forces were a diverse collection of warriors from across their vast empire, while the Greek defenders were primarily Spartans, Thespians, and Thebans, each bringing their unique fighting styles and traditions to the battlefield. For 2 days, the Greeks successfully repelled multiple Persian attacks. The Spartans' superior military training and their innovative phalanx formation proved devastatingly effective in the narrow pass. The Persian immortals, Xerxes' elite fighting force, failed to break through the Greek defenses, suffering heavy casualties in the process. The tide turned when a local shepherd, Ephialtes, revealed to the Persians a mountain path that would allow them to outflank the Greek position. Upon learning of this betrayal, King Leonidas made the fateful decision to remain with his 300 Spartans and about 700 Thespians who refused to retreat, while ordering the rest of the allied Greek forces to withdraw and fight another day. On the 3rd day, knowing they faced certain death, Leonidas and his men fought to the last warrior. Their sacrifice was not in vain. The delay they created allowed the Greek city-states to unite and better prepare their defenses, ultimately leading to decisive victories at the battles of Salamina and Plataea, which ended the Persian invasion of Greece. The legacy of Thermopylae extends far beyond its military significance. It became a symbol of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds. The famous epitaph composed by Simonides, which still stands at the battle site today, reads, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." These words encapsulate the Spartan ideals of duty, honor, and unwavering dedication to their principles. The battle has profoundly influenced Western culture throughout history. It has inspired countless books, artworks, and films, including the popular movie 300. Military strategists still study the battle for lessons in the importance of terrain, the power of determined resistance, and the value of sacrifice for a greater cause. The Battle of Thermopylae also teaches us enduring lessons about leadership. King Leonidas led by example, choosing to stay and fight alongside his men when he could have retreated. This demonstration of leadership through personal sacrifice has become a timeless model for leaders in all fields. In modern times, the story continues to resonate with people worldwide. It reminds us that numbers alone do not determine the outcome of conflicts, that courage and conviction can achieve what seems impossible, and that some principles are worth dying for. The battle site, now a popular tourist destination in Greece, serves as a powerful reminder of how a single act of bravery can echo through the centuries. The Battle of Thermopylae remains a testament to the extraordinary potential of human courage and determination. It shows us that defeat can sometimes be more influential than victory, and that true legacy lies not in the immediate outcome of our actions, but in their lasting impact on the human spirit. This ancient battle continues to inspire us to stand firm in our convictions, to face adversity with courage, and to understand that some moments in history transcend time to become immortal legends that guide and inspire future generations.